Hi, this is going to be my YouTube channel. This is going to be really awkward because it's the first video that I've ever made and I don't really talk to the camera that much. But I have to finish my sister's Christmas present. She asked me to paint her a picture of a mountain and I procrastinated really badly. It's January 13th today, I think. So, we're going to paint this together. I'm going to take you along with me, step by step, through how to do the painting. So if you're into a painting tutorial, that's what this is going to be. If you're not into a painting tutorial, try it out maybe? I don't know. Okay, starting off, we need our supplies. Very important, I've got an easel. You don't really need one. You can paint directly on a tabletop if you need to. I have a 16 by 20 canvas. You also don't have to do that if you don't want to. That's pepper. Very important part of this process. If you don't have a pepper, I'm sorry, I can't give you mine. Paint rag. Paint rag is super, super helpful for wiping off the paint as you're rinsing out your brushes so you don't get water all over the canvas. Various size brushes. You can use whatever size brushes you want. I like to use these square brushes, but it's also really the only brushes that I've used before. I'm not super comfortable with a round brush. I don't use them that often. This is the big one. This is a 1-inch flat brush. This is a 1/2-inch flat brush. And then I've got this little baby, I think it's like a 00 detail brush. Very important to have your water cup. 10 out of 10 points if it's reused. Make sure if you have a beverage, like I do, you put this on the opposite side of your canvas than your drink, so you don't accidentally drink your paint water. Pepper's trying to drink my drink. Wine, very helpful. This isn't all wine. This is like a little sangria spritzer thing. Creative juice, that's what we call it. Whenever you get a little stressy, you just take a little sip and it makes the stressy go away. I have a variety of paints here. A white, blue, black, purple, red, yellow, green. I like to just use the primaries and mix them as I go. That's the way I'm the most comfortable. These paints were gifted to me, so I don't know exactly what brand they are, but there's, if you're interested, I could put a little list on the screen, I guess. But we've got titanium white, phthalo blue, whatever black. It's just black. Violet, that's magenta, chrome yellow, chrome green, I think. Yeah. Anyway, some shades, primary colors, white, black. I probably won't even really use the purple. I like to mix my own purple, but it's here. I throw a canvas down on my tabletop just to protect the surface because, you know, you don't want to ruin it. I'm using acrylic paint today. You can use gouache or watercolor if you want. The instructions are going to be obviously different, but the same general vibe is still there, you know? Pepper, she's hanging out. She's going to be here. We also have Olive. She's my cat. She's around. She'll probably pop up in this. Okay, we gotta fight the lighting here because the sun's going away, so I'm gonna try to paint this kind of fast. Okay, so my painting's got a lot of, my sister wants a lot of blues, like light blues specifically, so I'm not gonna use a lot of blue. I'm gonna put a lot of white on my palette. I'm gonna do a little bit of black, just to add some shading later. And then it looks like there's some trees in the very foreground of my image, so we're gonna come in with some green. That'll be for later, really. Yellow. Okay, and then a little red, maybe. I might use it. Okay. Let's go through our materials one more time. I've got my full paint palette here. I have this handy dandy paint rag for wiping off my brush every time I rinse it off. I've got my water cup, my 3 brushes that I'm gonna use. I like a big brush, a medium brush, and a baby brush. I've got all my paints. But I'm going to start by taking my big brush. I'm going to swirl it around in the bottom of the water cup and wake the bristles up. This acrylic paint that I'm using is water-based, so it does like to mix with water. It spreads a little bit better that way. I should also mention that this is going to be a very beginner-friendly painting, so I'm not going to do anything super technical. I'm not going to start by underpainting. If you've never painted before, that's totally okay. That's what I'm here to guide you through, you know? I'm gonna metaphorically hold your hand the entire way and make this as easy as possible. I'll talk you step by step through like what colors I'm mixing, how much I'm mixing, my brush strokes that I'm doing, all of the good things really, so you don't have to think about anything except the paint and where to put it on the canvas. But also, feel free to mix up anything that you want to do, you know? You don't have to paint this mostly blue. If you want to add some like pastels or maybe make it a sunset background, I'm all for that. Yeah, change it up, mix it up. You don't have to follow this exactly. The important thing about painting is just that you get to do whatever you want. But I'm going to start up in top of my inspiration image. I like to start with the sky. So I'm going to use my big brush, take a really big scoop of white and put it somewhere off to the side of my palette so I can keep that separate from my original white. I'm going to grab a tiny, tiny, tiny little boop of blue, just a little boop of blue right onto my paintbrush, and then I'm going to mix that together on my palette, doing tiny little circles, tiny little X marks, trying to keep that all in as small of a pile as I can so that way I have the most paint to work with on my canvas. Now, I know I'm going to be using a lot of blues in my image, so I kind of want to start thinking about how I'm going to distinguish between all of these. So I'm going to add just a tiny, 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 tiny bit of red, just the smallest little amount of red to my blue to give that kind of this like soft, kind of just warms up that blue color. And then when I go to put it on my canvas, I'm going to focus this color kind of up in these top general sections where I want it to be the darkest. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Okay, pretty dark. I mean, it's not super dark, but a dark shade of blue. I'm going to start up on this top section, and I'm just going to do these side-to-side brush strokes with my big brush, trying to keep my brush as flat as possible. I like the way that this makes the sky kind of blend together. These side-to-side brush strokes kind of smooth everything out and make things feel a little bit more soft, more subtle. They don't have as much crazy energy to them. And I think that's the vibe my sister would want in her room, to be fair. She's a little chaotic, so anything to calm her down a bit is probably pretty good. Okay, so I added most of that dark blue to these side edges. Now I'm just gonna dip my brush in the plain white paint, and then I'm gonna use that to kind of soften up the edges and bring that more into my sky here. So grab a little bit of white right on your brush, and right between where the blue meets the canvas, I'm gonna put my brush halfway into the light blue that was already on there and halfway into the exposed canvas. And then I'm just gonna go back and forth over and over and over and over in that same spot a few times. Because that paint on the canvas is already wet and I'm adding some more wet paint right onto it, the colors will start to blend together right on the canvas instead of having to mix a bunch of colors on your paper plate or your palette or whatever you're using. And I'm just gonna use some white paint to come in here and soften up some of these colors to make a nice transition between the darker blue and we're gonna kind of bring a lighter blue down the sky. I'm just gonna kind of mix a little bit more white into my blue, and I'm just gonna bring that down about halfway down the canvas, really. We are gonna put a mountain over this later, so like it doesn't have to go all the way down the canvas. I'm just gonna go halfway down so that way I know that when I go to put that mountain in there later, there'll be a bunch of sky behind it instead of just like white on my canvas. Pepper, so I'm just spending some time blending this out. You can also grab a little bit of water on your brush if you're using kind of a water-based acrylic, and you can use that to blend these out as well. Soften up the edges. I try to make as much paint at the beginning with that big blue blob that I started with, so that way I could just go back and add more white as I go instead of having to remake the color over and over and over again. Okay, so this mountain takes up a really good chunk of my canvas. So I brought my paint down about here. I know there's gonna be a mountain in here, so I'm not really gonna worry about painting the rest of the canvas all the way down. I am gonna put my paintbrush in my water cup now, and I'm gonna go to my medium brush. Really quick, before we do that though, I am gonna make sure that I paint the edges of my canvas. So going all the way around the edges. So that way, I think she just ate paint. Pepper. That way when you go to hang it up on your wall, it looks like a nice finished piece and not like something we forgot about, you know? It's fine. Your amendments, that's fine. What's life without a little bit of excitement? I'm gonna put some clouds in here. Clouds are just fluffy blobs in the sky, so probably they sound more intimidating than they are. I'm gonna grab a big scoop of my white paint and I'm gonna mix it into that blue color again to make it the lightest shade of blue that we possibly can. We don't want to do like straight white because then it won't, it'll seem like it's sitting on top of the sky, not like a part of the sky. So I'm gonna mix blue with a lot of white, and then I'm just gonna kind of put clouds wherever I want. In my inspiration image, they're mostly up here. They kind of go out to the side a little bit, but I already have some of that like white mixed in with my sky, so it already kind of has those like wispy clouds. So I'm just gonna take my medium brush and I'm gonna move my brush in these little kind of up and down blobby motions. You can use, I like to use the very tip of the brush and kind of tap. I do a lot of tapping when I'm doing my clouds. I try to not think about clouds that much. So I kind of just like tap a lot of paint in there, and then I kind of like rotate my brush in like this circular motion, just kind of tapping it. And because some of that blue in the back of our canvas that we started with is still wet, it's gonna kind of blend into those blues that are already in the back and kind of make a layer of dimension. So I'm kind of just doing this tappy motion, pushing the white into the blue that's already in the background, not focusing on one spot too heavily, because clouds are natural and organic and you don't want to overwork them. I just did like one light little cloud here, a couple blobs in here, and now I'm going to go into just my plain white, and I'm going to do the same thing we just did, but just add some plain white in there so that way they feel they've got a little bit more layering to them. Also, when you're doing clouds, you don't want them to all look the exact same, so you kind of just blob them on and then move on to another cloud, make a different blob. Honestly, I like to paint clouds with my eyes closed sometimes. It takes the stress away. And then you can kind of push the paint into the canvas by like rubbing the brush or pushing the brush kind of hard into it, and that kind of makes the clouds fade off a little bit, which is kind of nice. But honestly, just play with it. The clouds we're just making, you know, happy little clouds, as Bob Ross says. They don't have to be anything specific. Just kind of make whatever clouds your heart wants, you know? That's great. I'm gonna put my medium brush in my water. Not gonna use it for another few minutes. I'm gonna come in and do like a mid-tone for my mountain. You have your highlight, your low light, and your mid-tone. So your highlight is the brightest white, your low light is the dark shadows on the mountain, and then your mid-tone would be like a mid color. So in between that, I'm gonna make a color that's very similar to my sky, but I'm gonna mix a little bit of black with it so that way it has a gray tone to it. So I'm gonna go back to my big brush. Since I'm using the same blue color that I used before, I'm not gonna rinse it off. I'm not gonna focus on that at all, but I am gonna take a big scoop of white, and I'm just gonna mix it right on top of the section that I was using before on my palette, because again, we're just working with the same tones here. And then I am gonna take a little bit of blue. So a big scoop of white, little bit of blue. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of red like I did before. So that way the mountain has the same tones as the sky, because all that white is reflecting the color from the sky. And then this time I'm also gonna add the smallest little bit of black that you can grab, because we're not trying to make it really intense. I like that color. It's a little purpley. It's a little on the purple side. It's like a blue purple. Okay, and then I like to load up my big brush and then kind of push it into the paper plate so that way the tip of my brush is nice and flat. And then I'm gonna eyeball where my mountain is. So in my inspiration image, it's pretty far off to the left. And I like to line the top corner of my brush up where the peak of my mountain will be. And then I hold my brush parallel to my canvas, and I'm just gonna draw a big bumpy triangle. It's pretty high up the sky, so I'm gonna come up maybe a hand width from the top of my canvas or so. If you're using a smaller canvas, maybe leave the top fifth of the canvas. You know, the mountain's pretty high in this image. You just gotta commit. I know it's a little scary, but you just gotta commit. I'm gonna place my brush, and then I'm gonna pull the edge of the mountain down, and as I'm doing this, I'm kind of wiggling my hand, giving it a little shaky motion, like an up and down motion, so that way the mountain looks lumpy and bumpy, because mountains have a lot of rocks on them, so you don't want them to be a perfect triangle. That's not going to make them look realistic. And then this mountain it's like pretty flat, so after that I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but I'm going to line up the top point with the top peak of my mountain, draw this line down. Again, give it a lumpy bumpy. It does have a second little peak kind of popping up here, so I'm gonna go up a little for that peak. And then drag the line all the way out. Okay, and then as I go down, I'm gonna just add more white to this. As I work my way down the canvas, so that way it kind of fades out a little bit. And we're gonna layer over this a bunch, so if your mountain's looking kind of questionable right now, that's totally okay. My mountain has a lot of these little tendrils kind of coming down. It's the snow between all the trees and things, so I'm just gonna kind of get those going a little bit, making these general shapes. Okay, we got a lot going on here. It's a little crazy, and that's okay. I'm gonna give this a second to dry, take a little dry break, and then we'll come back and we'll add our shadows and our highlights. And that's what's gonna really bring the mountain together. My sun is going away, so I have to turn on the yellow light. I'm so sorry. It's gonna really mess up the color of this, but it's pretty okay. The color's not that bad. Actually, you might be able to see it better now that we have the big light. Okay, so there's a ton of these little valleys in my inspiration image. We have a ton of shadows. There's a lot of ridges. So I'm gonna kind of come in here and get this dark blue color to create those big shadows, and then we'll come in and add trees and such later. I'm gonna go a darker shade of what we just did. So I grabbed a little bit of blue. I'm gonna grab a little bit of red, the smallest little bit of black, and then a scoop of white. And we're trying to make the darkest shade of our mountain. You can use whatever color. If you want this to be more purple, like you want more red, that would be really pretty, more of like a lilac mountain. If you want it to be more blue, or maybe you did like a night sky, you can add less white and make the color more dark. This is what my color looks like. It's kind of blueberry-esque. And again, I'm gonna load that up onto my palette. You could always hold your brush up to your inspiration image to kind of color match as well. And then I'm gonna start by trying to do this ridge. And you don't have to make your ridge very specific. Basically, I'm just gonna kind of go from the peak of my mountain and draw some squiggly lines going down. So I'm gonna come up top here, just like we did with the side of the mountains. Draw a line down, a squiggly across, and then it kind of goes down like this. Again, this doesn't have to be very specific. The mountain shadow kind of ends where this second little ridge is. So I'm gonna kind of start there, go up to that ridge, kind of do this little swoopy, because I think that's just this little valley that pops up here. Little swoopy. And then just these little bumpy lines kind of connecting to the bottom here. It looks crazy right now, I know. It's gonna be okay. Okay, and then I'm gonna go over the outline of the mountain again, because that whole area is shadowed, and then we're gonna fill this whole section in. Got a little ridge going up the top over on this top corner, so I'm going to kind of follow the line of my mountain over here and then kind of bump right over there. Nothing crazy. And we've got some shadowy bits kind of coming from the trees here, so I'm just going to kind of, my favorite thing to do in instances like this where like the shadows aren't very specific shapes, I squint my eyes or I blur my eyes. I actually normally wear glasses, and I like to paint without my glasses on because I feel like it helps me get shapes better rather than seeing everything in a very definite, like, I know that's a shadow, but when I don't have my glasses on, it's just a blob, you know? And if it looks like a blob, then I'm doing good. Makes me feel better about myself. I'm gonna grab a tiny bit of water on my brush because that's gonna make this color go a little bit further. And it's also nice because it'll water it down as I kind of work on the canvas. So then you'll get some really deep shadows and some not so deep shadows. I'm still using my big brush. Big brush is my bestie. If you want to use a smaller brush, or if you're working on a smaller canvas and you want a different brush, that's totally fine. Use whatever you want. Okay, so I got some water. I mixed some water in with my blueberry color, and now I'm gonna blur my eyes. I'm gonna blur my focus looking at my inspiration image and try to see where the deepest shades are. So I'm gonna come in here. There's a little bit kind of coming down this section. I'm just kind of really lightly tapping my brush because I don't want anything to be really specific, like really harsh like this section was, because that's the only real big section of the round that has a lot going on. And then it kind of has a little, goes down like this. I'm gonna grab a little bit more water on my brush. You could also mix your color with a little bit more white. I know this looks crazy right now. Again, there's a lot of tree shadows in this picture, which makes this a little complicated, but that's okay. I'm gonna kind of come in here and try to create some of those tree ridges that the trees are gonna be on. And I know that those are darker because the trees are shadowing them. So everywhere that you see kind of like a tree bundle, you're gonna just kind of start to fill that in. Still gonna look crazy until we go to add the rest, you know? Okay, now I'm gonna wipe off my brush. I'm wiping my brush on my paint rag just because it'll keep a little bit of that blue in there, and that's okay. Something that's really important to do when you're doing paintings like these, you know, you're like up close and personal with them the whole time. You're literally feet away from them. When you're done with the painting, you're never, on average, like never gonna be closer than 3 feet to your painting. So like when it's hanging on a wall, right, you're never really like this up close with it. So it's always good not every few minutes, but like, you know, every 10, 15, 20 minutes or so to just get up, take a couple steps back, kind of look at the painting as it is. And honestly, looking at it through the lens of your phone camera is a great way to do it too, because your phone's not going to capture as many details as your eyeballs are, which, sorry, that makes it a little hard for, you know, doing this tutorial. I'm using my phone camera right now, so you're not going to get the biggest quality of film. You know, this is my first YouTube video, so maybe one day the quality will be better. Really good opportunity to make sure you get those side edges. I did not get mine perfectly. Thank you guys for saying something about that. It's fine. We're still friends, I promise. I'm looking at it through my phone camera. Looks pretty good. I feel like this shape matches with that shape pretty good. All of this black, or it looks black in the image. It's going to be kind of like a dark blue-green when we go to paint it. But yeah, that's all going to come in over all of these shadowy sections. So it looks crazy right now, I know, but trust the process. It's going to be great. I'm going to wipe off my brush, because this is where we're going to go in with the brightest whites. This is the snow. I'm going to keep using my big brush because, again, big brush is my bestie. If you want to use a smaller brush, feel free to. I didn't rinse it off. There's still a lot of that blue on there, so we'll kind of pick it up as we go. I've just got white right on the tip of my brush, and we're going to squint our eyes again, okay? Blur your eyes. Look at your inspiration image and see where the brightest whites are. So in this one specifically, I'm squinting. My brightest whites are up in this section, kind of up in this section here, and a little bit right here. They kind of trail into some of the tree pockets, but I'm gonna save that to do later when I've got those trees in there, because it'll be easier to add the snow over top of them. And it also helps you have like this buffer to clean up your lines. Okay, so white paint right on my brush. I go to the top of my mountain and just kind of follow it down, trying to deposit as much paint as possible without kind of blobbing it out. Also, I do want to leave a little bit of that like kind of mid-tone purplish color that we had at the beginning, because that's really gonna make a lot of this feel like it has more depth and it isn't so flat. So as I deposit some of those really bright whites, I'm kind of releasing pressure on my brush to kind of leave some sections that end up with some of that mid-tone. So like there's these sections that have really thick solid white, but then as I'm kind of pulling away, I'm releasing the pressure. I'm like kind of, you know, not pushing so hard on my canvas, and that's what's gonna help make more of these bright whites. And then maybe I'll go back in with some more white, just using the very tip of my brush. I'm not using a lot of anything else, like the sides or anything, and I'm just gonna come in here and kind of layer some white. I'll layer some a little bit over my shadowy parts too, because that'll help kind of tone them down a little. Just some of them, you know, you don't want it to be like all of them, because obviously you just worked so hard putting all those in there. But it does help kind of tie them in and soften them up. I don't know if you can hear how scratchy my brush is, but it's kind of nice having a dry brush, because then you can go over some of these really dark sections and kind of soften them up if you want, so they're not so harsh. Take a step back now and see if I want to add any more anywhere else. There's the bright white up on this top section here. I trailed the paint down by just not adding more paint to my brush, kind of using a dry brush. I've got my bright white here and right here, and then all of this stuff that I kind of put in here, again, didn't load my brush with any more paint. I let it dry out and I kind of deposited the paint as I went down. Now, I'm not going to focus on this bottom section too much because we're going to come in and add the trees. But I do see some stripes of white kind of coming down the mountain here, so I am going to try to Now we're gonna let it dry for a couple minutes and then we'll come in and add the trees. And if you want, knowing when to stop is the hardest part. So if you like kind of keep messing with it and you're like, oh man, I wish I had kept some of that dark color in there, you could always kind of go back to your dark color and work it in while the paint's still a little bit wet. But I urge you to kind of at some point put the brush down, take a step back. If you're putting paint on the canvas and you don't really know why you're doing it, it's really an opportunity to just, or it's a good signal to put the brush down and take a break. Kind of nice. I mean, you can see the big blob kind of matches all these ridges that are coming in here with the trees. They're gonna come in here. I think it's gonna look pretty good. Give yourself a little pep talk as much as you can. We're doing great. You guys are doing great. If you've made it this far, you're doing great. I'm gonna use my medium brush. I'm gonna do this in a really abstract way. So all of these trees are just like fuzzy little blobs in the background. Not fuzzy blobs in like clouds or fuzzy blobs, but they're a little bit like spiky blobs. But I'm gonna mix like a green, blue, black situation. So I rinsed my brush really good because I think the last time I used my medium brush I was doing clouds, and I don't really want white in there at this point. So now I'm gonna take a big scoop of my green paint and put it onto my second palette. I'm gonna mix some yellow with it too. And then a big scoop of blue. And then I'm gonna start by mixing those colors together. See where we're at. I like to add my black in little increments because you can always, it's just, again, a lot easier to make colors darker than it is to make lighter. So if you add too much black, it's really hard to go back to the color that you wanted. Again, you don't have to color match things perfectly. It's kind of fun to play around with the colors you're using. They don't have to be the exact colors that are in your inspiration image. I think my sister kind of wants that, but usually I tend to add more like, I try to not use as much black. I usually kind of darken things with like a blue or like a dark purple, so that way it's not so intense. Honestly, just kind of like keep mixing colors until you get something you're happy with. If you're painting on a paper plate, I recommend kind of painting something off to the side to see how it smears, because the color looks a little bit different when it's like super thick versus just smeared on the canvas. I think I need more black, honestly. I think that's okay. It's gonna be really hard for you to see, I think. But it's like a really, really, really dark olive green. Now I'm just gonna start tapping. I like to use the corner of my square brush for stuff like this, stuff that has texture but doesn't have definite shapes. Blurring my eyes, I'm just gonna take in the shapes, not really each individual tree design. And I also like to kind of back up from my canvas, but I like to kind of step back, and I like to hold my brush towards the end because that's gonna give me less control over each individual shape and more control over just the general blobs. Okay, so I'm blurring my eyes, I'm holding my brush really far away. I'm gonna use the corner of my brush and I'm just gonna do a tapping motion, like a lob. Okay, so everywhere that you kind of have these dark sections, not so much in this, there's not a lot of trees in the very peak of the mountain, but as you go down, we're focusing these blobs in these shadowy sections because the shadows were made from the trees to begin with. So here we go. And again, I'm just tapping my brush. I'm kind of just building in these shapes really quick. gonna take a step back because I know that I got kind of like halfway into my canvas. Got some rocks in here instead of trees, so I'm kind of changing up the way that my brush stroke goes so that way it kind of shows that something's a little different in here. Okay, again taking a step back. It looks okay. We're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna come in and add the trees in the foreground. And I think when we add the trees in the very front, it's really gonna tie this whole thing together. Trust the process, you know? Take your time, take as long as you need, but try not to focus too hard on each individual tree blob, because they're all super different. Okay, and I am gonna take this opportunity to turn my canvas and paint the whole bottom. Almost done, guys. We made it more than halfway through a painting. That's really good. Congratulations. So I like to take my medium brush. I rinsed it out really, really good. We're gonna start by painting just black trees first, and then we're gonna layer some lighter colors over them to add some depth. And the way that I like to paint trees is I get black paint on mostly one corner of my brush. So just one corner of my brush, and then I'm gonna show you on a paper plate so that way it's a lot bigger and easier to see. I start by going to the top of the tree, putting a little dot, and then I'm just gonna lightly tap and go out from the middle. Every time you go down, you bring the branch out just a little further. And again, I'm just tapping the corner of my brush. And then you can get them to be a little bit thicker and crazier if you push a little bit harder, but still use the corner of the brush because it keeps that shape. So now I'm gonna put these trees in my inspiration image. They're all in the foreground here. So the tallest ones are right here, and then they are a couple of little shorties, and they kind of get shorter as they go across. And this is where I kind of start to disregard the inspiration image, because you kind of just put a tree wherever your painting feels like it needs one. You know, like if you're like, I really don't like the way that this turned out, you can just put a tree in front of it, and then it's easy. It's a nice, easy fix. I'm gonna start here. Just kind of do little taps. And again, I'm just tapping, and every time you do a new tap, you go back to the center of your tree. That's what's gonna make it look like there's a tree trunk in the middle. So I'm tapping every branch out, and as I go out, I always bring it back to the center. Now we're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna come in an olive green color. I'm gonna grab a big scoop of yellow and a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. So the green part is going to be focused on the side with the sun. So our light source is coming from this top corner. So that means the green on our trees is going to be on this side of every single tree. So in the same brush stroke, I'm not even going to let my paint dry fully because it'll be really nice having this mix in with some of those. I'm going to grab just the exact same technique we did before where you get it on the corner of your brush. Starting at the top of the tree. On one side, I'm just going to kind of just dragging this olive color out. And then I am going to add it a little bit overlapping some of the ones kind of coming out this way, just because trees aren't perfectly symmetrical, so they're going to have some light that catches on the opposite side of the tree as well. Okay, I think that looks pretty nice. I might add a little bit more yellow to this color. And then just go back in one more time over that. Just adding a couple more little spots. Right over those ones that we just did, just to make some of them the most bright. Cute. I added my brightest highlights. If you want, you could add another layer of white over them. I like it how it is though, so you know, knowing when to stop when you're doing any kind of art is the hardest part. So if you're at a point and you're like, I don't really know if I should add more, or you're just kind of, again, putting paint on the canvas just to put paint on the canvas and you don't really know why you're doing it, really good opportunity to put the brush down again and take a step back and look at it that way. So then when you're all done with your painting, the very, very last step is to just take your baby brush and pick a color that you like and you sign your name. And that is our snowy winter scene. Hey, I hope you guys liked painting with me. Thanks so much for sitting through this and watching. If you made it all the way to the end, I super appreciate that. I hope that many more of these videos come after this and that I just get better as I go. Just learning. If you're learning how to paint, congratulations, it's really fun. It's also a little bit scary, so I hope that we can kind of spend this time together and make it not scary. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Share it with your friends if you want. I know it's super casual, super low-key, super not well produced, and that's okay. That's just what I'm rolling with right now. If you want to follow me on anything, my name is Kaylee Smith. I'm at Kael Ceramic, Kael Ceramic, everywhere on the internet. Ceramic is my main focus, but I've been a painting teacher for a few years now, and I really like it, and I just want to share what I know with you guys, so painting is less scary. Good luck wintering. I hope everyone's kind of settling into some kind of rest period with all of the chaos going on. Yeah, and I hope this space can just be kind of a place where we can all relax together and have fun. Thanks for joining me. Have a really good rest of your day.